was Islam, this aggressive and dangerous religion. This cannot be the truth. Please, God, please. Anything but not Islam.
I was an atheist. I didn't see the point in religion.
It was a way of controlling freedom. And so when you get rid of religion, you kind of get rid of God with it too.
I believe that if God had a religion, it would have proof. There would be tangible, physical, manifested proof.
In the course of 3 years, I built this thing, the bomb. So there was an Islamic center in my hometown, Ramadan on a Friday afternoon. They're all there. And I was gonna put it there, middle of the night before. And it was easy because everybody hates Muslims. The ones who I had gotten my impression of Islam from were a bad example. That's not Islam. This is more like Islam. So I just kept reading and kept reading. My ill feelings started to slowly dissipate. They just went away.
I was convinced of Islam easily, but I hesitated because of the bad image of Islam.
I read the Quran and I read the Quran, and so the third day, I really got into the Quran. I was committed to reading it for hours. And so what happened was my cellmate said, "You've been reading that book since breakfast. Are you gonna eat or no?" And I just thought, I'm really into this book. Why?
How was your life before Islam? What were you believing in?
I grew up with a lot of Christian teachings, as most American children do. I knew about them, but to be honest with you, I was getting this nationalist ideology about me. Religion just didn't play a part. It seemed too mythological, too much hocus pocus, maybe, But I believed in my country, I tell people, for lack of a better example, the flag was my cross. That's the best way I can explain that.
So I was a Southern Baptist Christian. I grew up in a place called the Bible Belt, which there's more churches than there are McDonald's. I studied the Bible. I was a youth minister. I was a missionary. I served in a mission in Guatemala. Time when I exited Christianity, I was a youth minister in a Southern Baptist church.
For a while, yes, I was an atheist. I didn't see the point in religion. I thought that it was a way of keeping people from being happy and doing whatever they want to do. Mm-hmm. It was a way of controlling freedom, religion. And so when you get rid of religion, you kind of get rid of God with it.
Well, my journey to Islam began my senior year in college when I decided I wanted to become a Baptist preacher. I decided not to quit college and go to seminary, but to finish my degree and then go to seminary. So I had 1 year to finish. And because of my enthusiasm, I just started dragging all of my friends, colleagues, everybody I met into a religious conversation so that I could think about how I could practice saving people, right? The whole mission would be to convert them to Christianity.
I always believed in God since day one. I have never had a moment in my life of, what if there was never a God? I've never had that problem in my heart. I'm reading the Bible. And I'm reading a particular verse about Jacob, where Jacob says, the first verse that I read was, "No man can see God and live after that." And I'm thinking, but people call Jesus God, and they all saw Jesus, and no one died looking at Jesus. So the verse was, "No man can look at God and live after." I turned the page to another verse, another story of Jacob. Not only does Jacob see God, he is wrestling God. He has in a wrestling match, has God by the thigh and says to God, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Okay, wait a minute. You just said that if you even see God, that no man can live after that. Okay, so why is Jacob living after that? And why does God have a form that you can hold on to? And why can't God, being all-powerful, pull away from Jacob? The story goes on. So what did I do? 14-year-old me raised my hand. The pastor came over and said, "How can I help you?" I showed him the 2 verses, and his reaction was, I didn't even know that was in the Bible. And I said, what? But you're the Bible pastor. You're the one that's supposed to be teaching us the Bible. And as a 14-year-old boy, I asked him, how do I rectify this? How do I make sense of this? I found myself reading about other religions. I read about Judaism. I read about Hinduism for about 5 minutes. I read a book, and I just said, no way.
I believe that if God had a religion, it would have proof. There would be tangible, physical, manifested proof. So I was asking all these other religions, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, whatever it be. They all had the same level of contradictory information.
So there was an Islamic center in my hometown. I didn't really know anything about these people. I'd see them. So I had watched this place before in several different times, not just once. If I put a bomb here, are they going to find it? So I don't want that to happen. So on the back side, I found a good place for it. And it was easy because at that time, common enemy. Everybody hates Muslims. And in the course of 3 years, that's what I did. I built this thing, the bomb. I took my time. I was going to make a big statement. Now, a lot of people think that's crazy on so many different levels because how are you going to get away with that? I had no intention of getting away with it. I knew I was going to be caught. I knew I would go to trial because they would execute me. I was good with that because I wasn't getting my flag draped coffin, but I believed that eventually these same people were going to think of me as a hero because I was right. And my daughter had told me about this Muslim child that she was in school with, and I blew up. So I thought I failed my family because I couldn't protect them. I can't protect her at school from these Muslims. That was my whole thing. I just totally lost it. And my daughter, 7 years old, is looking at me like I've just lost everything. And she was, the look in her eyes was like she was even questioning whether she even loved me anymore because I was being so racist or so, against these one people just because they looked a certain way or they did a certain thing. That was it. After different profanities came out of my mouth and, calling them all kinds of racial slurs, I guess is the best way to put it, I went up into my bedroom. I kind of sat on the bed and I started to cry a little bit. I said, well, you have to find the proof, man. You know you're right. I believed in myself I was right because they're evil. They want to kill us all, right? But I didn't have any kind of tangible proof to show my daughter. I didn't have that. So I had to go get it. Where am I going to get it? The mosque. Where else? And I went in there, I met with them, and I introduced myself as somebody just wants to learn a little bit more about Islam. Not a total lie, but didn't tell them what my real intentions were. So, I was introduced to several people, talked to several people. It was a Friday. Again, I went on Friday because I knew they'd be there. I listened to the sermon, the khutbah, right? And I was like, man, that sounds good. They're just saying that because I'm here. I already know. They probably got people held down in the basement for propaganda videos. I already know. I mean, these are the things that are going through my mind, right? And then they handed me a Quran. And I was told to take it home, read it, come back when you have questions. I was so happy because in my mind, I felt like I'd just been handed the holy grail of evil and I'm going to have somebody explain it to me. Wow, that's better than hitting the lottery. Never been called an intellectual person, but a light bulb came on. Obviously, the ones who I had gotten my impression of Islam from were a bad example. That's not Islam. This is more like Islam. So I just kept reading and kept reading. My ill feelings started to slowly dissipate. They just went away. And, I get to certain passages in the Quran, Allah made us into different nations and tribes so that we may learn from one another, not despise one another. Oh, okay, I can see that right here because this person is involved with local government and Rotary Club and all these other organizations. Oh, okay, I get that. So it started to all go this way.
And I read it and the language, the delivery of the Quran was so unique to me. And I just thought, the way this book is worded is amazing. And so I read the Quran. And so the third day, I really got into the Quran. I was committed to reading it for hours. And so what happened was my cellmate said, hey man, aren't you going to dinner? I said, dinner? And I was looking up from my Quran. I said, dinner? And he said, yeah, you've been reading that book since breakfast. Are you going to eat or no? I said, yeah, I probably should. I closed the Quran and I went and I just thought, I'm really into this book. Why?
The miracle of the Quran, they're endless. There's no one greatest miracle. People think because I talk about the language of the Quran, to me the language is the miracle of the Quran. No, language is one of many. And to a psychologist, they might see something in an ayah about the nafs, that is their miracle. to a geologist something else, to a historian something else, to a sociologist something else, to a philosopher something else. That might be the miracle to them. To a linguist something else, to a comparative religion expert something else. The miracles of the Quran are actually dependent on who's coming to them. That's one of the most amazing things about the miracle of the Quran is it's not just one stick turning into one snake, right? It's every human being has the ability to find their miracle in this book.
This cannot be the truth. And even, it's like I said to myself, please God, please, don't let this be the truth. Anything but not Islam. Please select something else but not Islam. Why this has to be the truth? Yeah. Because I said, no, how can I follow this religion? I knew about the picture of Islam in the West. And I said to myself, if I go to my parents, my friends, if I tell anyone I'm Muslim, impossible. So that's why I was convinced of Islam easily, but I hesitated because of the bad image of Islam.
I go back to the Islamic Center on a Friday, and I meet two guys, two of the original guys that I was introduced to that I'd gotten kind of built a relationship with now. And I went up to them and I says, hey, I want to take Shahada. True story. They're standing side by side. They look at each other. They look back at me. Simultaneously, they go, no. True story. Oh my gosh. I was blown away. I was like, what do you mean no? They said, brother, you got more to learn. So they look back at each other. They look back to me. All right, come on. True story. It was quite an experience. As we were going through it, you know, said it in English, and then we went through and said it in Arabic.
And so on that day, Jummah, 1991, I said, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. And I was a Muslim.
I was going to my barber. I remember I was at my barber. I was saying like, hey, isn't it prayer time? It's like duhur right now, right? He was like, yes, but he was like, are you Muslim already? I said, no, but I try to pray 5 times a day because I feel peaceful with it. And I'm pretty close, I said. I'm really pretty close. Then he asked me something, which was the thing maybe that I needed at that time. He said, what if you would die tomorrow? Or what if you would die today? Are you dying as a Muslim or are you dying as a non-Muslim? And subhanAllah, that's really made me think. And I didn't got an answer to that at that time. But on my way home, after I went to the barber, I was really asking myself, yeah, what am I dying? How am I dying? Where do I go? I mean, death is the best reminder sometimes. And I remember giving my friends a call on my way home saying, tomorrow, let's take my Shahada. I want to do it. I'm convinced.
When I took the Shahada, it was after 10 months of resistance. There was an internal conflict, an internal struggle, knowing that it's the truth, but sometimes trying to find excuses not to accept it. For 10 months. It was like a 10-month war inside myself, and all of a sudden the war was over. And it's like any other war, you're just happy it's over. But here, not in the way that you are defeated, you come out of this with a victory. And that's what I felt in my heart. It was the right decision. Just I asked myself, why didn't it take it so long? Why?
And I would work at that store, and then it would be Salah time. I'd run down to the shoe area, or the shoe warehouse, and go make Salah quickly and come back, join again. Asr time, go back, come back, go back, come back. I started being regular in my prayer. And my coworkers, they were all like Hispanics, because they didn't call me Norman, they called me Ali. Like, yo, Ali, what you doing, man? Why you being weird like that? Yo, why aren't you looking at me? So then I had to explain, I'm praying. Oh, man, yo, you talking to God? Yo, can you tell him to get me a promotion? I got a raise. So they had, then they started asking me questions about it. I didn't know anything about Islam. But my friends, my Dominican, Puerto Rican, Cuban friends in the neighborhood, the coworkers, they're like, so like, am I going to hell? It's like, I don't know. Yo, you can't eat pork, right? So I'm eating it right now. How you feel about that? I guess this is what they would do.
There's actually a funny story to that. Because after I took Shahada, again, I'm still not telling my wife nothing, right? She knows I'm going to the mosque, but she doesn't know what to think now. And so I go there and I take Shahada. I come home and I just plop down on the couch, kind of like, I just got back from work, something like that, right? And she goes, so is everything okay? Because she's worried that I'm going to do something, right? She has no idea. And I said, no, everything's great. She goes, okay. I looked at her and says, I'm a Muslim. This is another true story. Funny, but it's very true. So she said, what? I said, yeah, I took Shahada. She goes, you sure what? And so in my infant knowledge of Islam, right, I tried to explain it to her the best way I could, right, using examples of like baptism, okay? And she's like, she didn't know what to think. She stood there and she said, well, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm not putting anything around my head. All right. Well, you're not a Muslim, so I didn't even think that was a conversation. It's all right. And then she comes back a little while and says, and another thing, if you want more than one wife, I'm not going to be one of them. And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, like, man, I'm not sure I want this one. So she takes Shahada. We leave the university. I'm still kind of blown away, but I like to joke. I like to joke. So I looked at her and I said, I was driving and I looked at her and I said, so you're a Muslim now. About that more than one wife thing. She looked over at me with this mean look on her face and said, don't make me pull this car over. I said, I'm driving. How are you going to pull the car? I'm driving. She goes, I'll pull it over. So I was like, that's cool.
I had my now wife of 34 years in college, and we weren't married. We were waiting till I graduated to get married. But we had been dating for 3 years. We were engaged. We had a wedding planned. I'm doing all of this mental research. She's thinking I'm going to be a Baptist preacher. I'm decided I want to be a Muslim, right? But I'm not talking with people. I'm just doing this internally the whole time. So when I show up on the mosque and I take Shahada and I come home, I said, I want to tell you something. She goes, what? I'm going to be a Muslim. I became a Muslim. And her face looked at me. I mean, it's from hi to what? What did you do? I said, I became a Muslim. She goes, why would you do? And she started yelling and getting upset. And she says, I don't know where did this come from? I'm not gonna. And she started just making a list of things she was never gonna do. I'm like, calm down. Just be happy for me. I don't care what you do, right? It's for me. So she calmed down. I got that book, The Halal and Haram, right? So I was reading and I learned very shortly that Muslims don't deal in riba, interest. Well, I graduated with a degree in finance. I specialized in interest rates, how to make money with money. And I'm no longer going to be a Baptist minister. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So I start looking for whatever job I can find. And I get hired as a trucking sales rep. So calling businesses on the phone saying, use our truck lines to ship your product. And starting that, just have income. I read a little bit in the Halal and the Haram, and it says, hey, Muslims don't eat pork. So I go to my wife. I said, hey, I learned something. She goes, what? I said, Muslims don't eat pork. So when you're making dinner or whatever, don't give it to me. Just leave it out. She's like, what have you got? I mean, she gives me this sad look and a little upset. And then like I joined a cult, really, is what she's thinking. And she's like, I'm not going to do this. And she goes on about what she's not going to. I said, don't worry about you. Do what you want. Just let me be happy. I read a few pages later and it says, Muslim men don't wear gold. Well, I already had a gold wedding band picked out. I went to her, I said, hey, can we change this band to silver? She took off her engagement ring and threw it across her room and said, I'm not gonna. And she gets upset and then she calms down and then and I'm like, okay, but she goes on. Long story short, we ended up I talked her into going to a mosque and getting Islamically married. And I went to church and got through the whole wedding that we already had planned. So 2 weddings. But she was just tolerating me. She really liked me, but she thought what I was doing was weird. Few more halakas, and I come home one day and she goes, I think I'm ready. I go, ready for what? To be a Muslim. But I'm not going to, she gives me this list of things she's not going to do. I'm like, hey, this is going my way. Yeah, fine, good. You want to be a Muslim? She becomes a Muslim. Make a long story short, everything she said she would never do, she now does.
I called my father, like I always did in prison, and I told him that I had become a Muslim. And my father, remember, he's super Christian and super strict. He said, you did what? And I said, I have become Muslim. You worship the moon god? And I don't worship a moon god or the moon, or I worship one God, the God of Jesus, the God of Moses and Abraham. And he said, no, you don't. No, listen, you're on this Islam. And he said an explicitive, and he told me, give an ultimatum. He said, look, you know your 6-figure income, your 6-figure inheritance. that's going to be gone. The things that you're going to inherit after me, gone. My family is in the petroleum industry, so very well off. And I said, you're going to disown me? He said, after today, if you insist upon this Islam religion, you are dead to me, all your inheritance gone. And he said, son, don't test me. I will go to my lawyer tomorrow and have him change the will, and you will be completely penniless. You will have no income whatsoever, nothing from me. You will be dead to me, dead to your brothers and your sister. You're done. So choose the words that you say very carefully. Now, will you leave Islam or will you stay in this fake religion? And I said, before I answer, Dad, let me tell you something. I will obey you in everything except this one thing. And he said, why? Before you're dead to me, explain to me why. And I said, Dad, I have to make my own decision. There's something more than a six-figure inheritance. There's something more than inheriting property. There's something more after this life. And I don't care about this life. So when it comes to matters of salvation, you can keep your money. Give it to my brothers, my sister, give it to charity, I don't care. I have to insist that I become a Muslim and remain a Muslim. And here I am, 32 years later, a Muslim, alhamdulillah. So after that, I insisted upon becoming a Muslim and staying a Muslim. I got a letter in the mail about 2 weeks later. He had done exactly that. He had gone to his lawyer. The amount that I was set to inherit was $600,000, and that was back in the early 90s. So it was a sizable chunk of money. So why would I put a price tag on, I don't care if it was $600 million. Look, you and I are going to be put in a grave, and we're going to be in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one, the irresistible. And we're going to be, questioned about what we did in life.
So my grandfather had had a heart attack. He was in the hospital, and I had driven back from Pensacola, Florida, where I was living, to be there with him. In the hospitals, we have a waiting room, and there's a telephone there, and there's always someone sitting near that phone answering for all the families, for people who are having surgeries. So I was sitting there, and my brothers in Islam knew that I was, my grandfather was ill, and there was a Saudi brother, his name was Muhammad al-Atabi, sitting there, and the phone rings, and my aunt, she's the loudest one in our family, her voice carries for miles. Phone rings, she grabs the phone. I didn't know the conversation. I'm just assuming what he told her was, is Harun there? And then my aunt, Harun, is there a Harun here? Harun family? And I just I sink down in my chair. And then Muhammad, he tells, oh, wait, Carly, is Carly there? And then my aunt's curious now. She's wondering. So I hear, huh? Carly? Islam? So Islam? Huh. She does that, and she passes the phone to me, and I'm, yes, hello. Alaikum salam. Yeah, okay, I gotta go. Bye. So at that point, my whole family found out all at once. They all knew. And the response was, huh. It was very simple.
Have you ever experienced an extraordinary event where you felt that you had a special connection with Allah?
When I got out of prison, one of the stipulations was that I must keep a job. If I got fired for something I did, that would be considered a violation of my probation. I'd have to go back to jail for the rest of the 2 years. And so when I got out of prison, I found a job doing construction. The first Friday that came up, I told the boss that when everybody takes lunch, because we had an hour lunch break, I said, instead of lunch, I'm gonna go, it was like 3 miles down the road. I said, I'm gonna go to Friday prayers because they knew I was a Muslim. They saw me pray on the job site. I said, I'm gonna go to Friday prayers. And he said, you're not allowed to leave the work site. And I said, I'm not really asking for permission. I'm telling you what I'm gonna do. And he said, if you leave the work site, you are fired. Like you're quitting. So I had a choice of stay on the job and disobey Allah's command or go to Jummah. And I said, you know what? I spent 4 years in prison learning my deen to do the right thing. I'm gonna do the right thing. So I left. I said, fine, keep your job. I'm gone. So I went to Jummah and made a lot of dua during that Jummah that, Ya Allah, I've come here to give obedience to you, so help me out here. After Jummah, a young man came up to me. He came and he said, brother, you have a job? And I said, yeah, I had a job till today. I actually walked out of the job site and quit it to come here. He said, my dad, who was the imam, he said, my dad came to ask me, do you want to work at his pizza shop? I said, of course, I need a job. So he gave me a job starting that day, making double the money that I was making at the construction site. The time I left the job to the time I had a new job was 2 hours. When you do something sincere for Allah, يَجْعَلَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He will make for you a way out. So doing the right thing is scary sometimes, but that was one of the most beautiful nights I think I ever remember in my life.
What was the best attribute of the Prophet ﷺ that impressed you the most?
His mercy, especially the time he was coming back from Ta'if, trying to call for the people of Ta'if, but being thrown the stones and against act. Then when he was offered by the angel mountain to crush them, what he said, subhanallah, please don't. Perhaps there might be generations after them, those who would believe in one God.
What I admired most about the Prophet Muhammad is his mercy. When I read about all these stories, how they treated him, then they fought a war against him, several battles, and then he comes back to Mecca and he enters Mecca victoriously. And I compared this with all these other examples from history, when someone was treated in that way and he comes back and turns out to be victorious. How does he treat these people? And he just enters Mecca and people are gathering around him. He asked them, what do you think what I'm doing with you right now? And they tell him, look, we know you. We expect only the best from you. And then he said, it's okay. Just you can go. It's okay. Just like this. It's not easy for a human being. How many times in real life, if we are attacked on the street, verbally or even physically, we want to defend ourselves and it's a natural reaction. But to swallow and swallow and swallow just for the sake of the message, because he is the example of mankind. He cannot let go of his ego. We can't do that. I'm not this one example of Islam. I'm just an ordinary Muslim.
His ability to inspire so many different kinds of personalities. Like the Sahaba, we think of them as one group, but they're not. There are people that are very temperamental. They're natural leaders. There are people that are, hesitant and quiet and outroverts and introverts and the intellectual types and the emotional types, all kinds of personalities. And yet he's not just able to inspire all of them, he's able to make them work with each other, love each other. How do you pull that off? So one of the most incredible things about Rasulullah is that he was able to build a bond between people that ended up changing the entire world.
Reading about his life, it was clear to me that here was someone who was completely without blame, completely doing exactly the right thing in life. I think that was a key thing. I've always been a perfectionist, always wanting to do the right thing, always deeply upset when I feel like I've done the wrong thing. And so being able to know the intimate moment-by-moment details of the life of this inspirational man, that was a real sense of healing for me, having a sense of what it means to be the best person I could be. And so just seeing him in all these situations as I read these narrations and hear stories about him and get to know him, his whole life is a healing for me.
Have you seen Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in your dream?
Twice.
Really?
Alhamdulillah. I was in the desert and I saw in the distance, he took my hand and he said, I want you to meet other people. And he sat down and I sat down right next to him and then he said, now look, here is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And he said, and over here is Umar ibn al-Khattab, and this is Uthman bin Affan, and this is Ali bin Abi Talib. And they all love you. And I just thought in the dream, why do they love me? I'm nobody. Why do they love me? But alhamdulillah, that was one of the best dreams that I've had in my life. I love you, Rasulullah. I love you.
Lastly, if you had the chance to speak to all the non-Muslims in the world, what would you like to say to them if you had a few moments?
Something to say to all non-Muslims in the world. I would like to quote one verse from the Quran. Do you think we created you just for amusement and play and you wouldn't be brought back to us? If you just look inside yourself, I think you will know that there is one God and he would never create this universe just like that. There must be something behind that. Go and search for the reason what is behind this universe.